memories, unseen angels sent from somewhere to my
It was the men from the Free Church in Milwaukee, Ebenezer Church, who brought my dad to the island. This was in the fall of 1937, Labor Day weekend, the first time he was here. And he was a candidate to be the pastor then. He'd served for a short time in a couple of different churches in Minnesota after he'd finished his seminary training. But that night, it was at night, the men had worked during the day, so they drove up at night, Friday night for Labor Day weekend. It was a stormy night. They were met at Gills Rock by Jake and Lars in the fishboat around midnight. And turned out that it was rough, and my father was the first to get seasick. I don't know that it gave him a whole lot of comfort when the rest of them got seasick too, but they did. But they got over to the west side of the island, just where Jake and Lars lived, just a little bit south of our house now. Jake and Lars had lit a lantern on either side of the little slip for their fish boat, but in the storm, one of them had blown out. So there was nothing for it but to turn around and go back to Detroit Harbor, where there were some lights. My father was not happy, but that was his introduction to the island. He preached that weekend and was here for 10 days or so. He and my mother were planning to get married around Thanksgiving time in Minneapolis that fall. So he had to go back and finish the things that needed to get done in preparation for them to get married. They were back here the end of November. It was cold already. They didn't have ramps on the ferry boats the way they do now. They had gangplanks. It was all ice, and they'd rigged up some ropes for my mother and the other passengers to grab onto to walk up the gangplanks. And they told my mother that on the island we have 9 months of winter and 3 months of poor sledding. I'm not sure if she really believed them, but that was what she used to say. They spent that first winter taking care of Ole Christensen. He was the owner of a freight boat, had been for many, many years on the island, owned a lot of land on the island, was well known. His family had all been wiped out by then by TB, but my dad said Ole was just too tough. He never got it. But he was an old man. He was dying that winter, and in the spring he did die. My father called the elderly man who was the island doctor in those years and told him that Ole had died so he could come over and see him to make out the death certificate. And Dr. Crane said, well, that wouldn't be necessary. He made the death certificate out without seeing the body. I don't know whether that was why my mother decided a couple of years later that I should be born on the mainland. Most births took place here on the island, but she was a city girl from Minneapolis, and I was born in Sturgeon Bay. Arnie used to tell me that it was a warm afternoon in early April, and the ice was deteriorating pretty fast. When my mother said it was time to go to the hospital, he brought my parents across. Arnie and his father had just bought the ferry line. They'd taken over officially the 1st of April in 1940. My birthday's on April 4th. He said it was the last trip they made that spring on the ice. And his recollection was that I was born that very evening in Sturgeon Bay.